Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's episode of the Avalon News. What are we going to cover today? Well, the first news that we have is going to be about the right to disconnect. The second one, we're going to talk about an interesting story of one of HBO Max's interns and one of the mistakes that they committed. The third news that we're going to cover is about the recent death of John McAfee. And finally, we're also going to cover a slightly painful fable of a very prominent news agency in Hong Kong. So, a lot of interesting nuances to all of these topics, and I'm looking forward to sharing them with you. I'll see you on the other side.
Follow your passion might be a perfect question to ask and might have a perfect answer when interpreted right.
Let's start tracking which stocks can actually go up and go down, or which stocks have an advantage with the vaccine coming out.
Why it would have been more expensive to fake a moon landing back in those days. It's quite an interesting video to watch.
The economic activity created from the App Store alone is worth $500 billion.
So, let's move on to the next question.
Man, it was too easy.
Too easy, no? Why didn't you answer? Alright guys, so the first news, it's almost 2 years, right, into the pandemic, and we've stopped asking that question, when will this end? Rather, we have turned to the question, has this become a normal, right? Is this ever going to change? So, even in spite of one of the things, no, don't put on this slide, right? No. So, one other thing that's happened is the whole idea of work from home, right? Of how our lives have been, our personal lives and our professional lives, those lines have started to blur. And this has affected a lot of people, especially in terms of not just their work-life balance or harmony, but also their mental health, right? Especially in countries like the US, UK, Canada, even India. And what we have learned is that in these countries, employers and employees, they see there's a little bit of a disconnect, right? Most of these countries are seeing that they're working well above more than 2 hours extra in terms of compared to how it was earlier on before the pandemic and before work from home became normal. And this extra hours, obviously, they're unpaid work, right? So a lot of people have started to complain because one, yeah, it is not working out in terms of the labor laws, and also it's affecting their mental health. So countries like France, countries like Ireland, countries like India, we have all come up with rules, right, called the right to disconnect. So currently, the UK legislation, they're kind of trying to push this bill. It's called the right to disconnect, where say after a particular period of time, you're not allowed to, use the phone, especially for work. You're not expected to use it, and you won't be shamed. You won't be called insincere or not as committed to work. So this is what UK is trying to push, the UK legislation. Now countries have already tried this. Say in the year 2017, Ireland tried to do the same thing. In 2018, India tried to push for a bill, but that didn't get approved. In fact, they say like in India as a country, we take pride in the amount of work that we get to do, right? Or we end up doing. It shows our commitment to doing work. But on the other hand, it also says that putting in these long hours is not probably the most effective way to go about things. It's probably not the most productive thing, and maybe some amount of taking a step back and working on other aspects of your life is very important. So that's called the right to disconnect. We'll see if this becomes part of the normal. Some people have gone against this law. They say that this is not the way to go about it. In fact, a lot of the other opposition end says a business should be allowed to run the way it is. Right? Employers should decide or be allowed to dictate how a business is run. And if you get the freedom to say go for a grocery shopping or walk while you're doing a meeting, you should also be allowed to work within these certain constraints and limits. So I'd like to see your opinion. What do you think? Should we have a right to disconnect, or is there more to the work-life harmony and balance situation? Okay, so that was the first news. It was a quick one. The second news that we have is again related to the work life, and that comes with the story of this wonderful intern. Let's have the slide. Okay, so how many of us have worked as interns? I mean, for one, I have worked as interns and apprentices in multiple avenues, multiple industries. And during these journeys, I've had a lot of great experiences and also some clumsy experiences, right? Some accidental mistakes that have happened. Now, this one here, this is from the HBO Max team, and they recently put out this tweet explaining how this email on the left that you see here, this integration test email number 1, this email was actually a mistake, and it was conducted, or it was done by one of their interns. Now, this story is very close to me because I had a very, very similar experience. I remember when I joined as an intern and I was working with a couple of clients. In fact, this was almost just after I finished my internship and I was becoming a full-time employee. And I wanted to impress, right? I wanted to impress, and there was this client, I remember, we were doing something really cool. They were set to launch their big product that was coming. So it's very similar. It was an email, and we were working with this email automation tool. And I remember going through this and I was like, okay, so there was multiple back and forths with different people in their team, right? We had designers, copywriters, etc. working on this side that I had to coordinate with, and also their client side managers who were approving things. So during this, we used to send a lot of test emails, right? And we used to make these separate cohorts to whom we should send these tests. And also there were multiple reworks because this was a product launch. So while doing this, I remember on one fine day on this automation software, which was not that perfect. So it's not entirely my fault. It was a little buggy. So because it was not that perfect, I remember it used to take a lot of time to load and fix certain features. I remember clicking on one of those cohorts, and the email, instead of sending it to say 2 to 3 people from the opposite team, it went out to 5,000 people. All right. It went out to 5,000 people. It was a D2C customer brand. And it went out. I remember getting so embarrassed, and I knew I'd made the mistake because once you click on that, there's no turning back. Okay, so I made that mistake. Suddenly, I get this message from certain people. They're like, "Hey, how did this come?" The best bit was I was able to save my ass. Right? What happened is so the head of the company, the opposite company, saw that, and he in fact gave feedback to our team, and they were like, "You probably just want to tweak that." And I was like, shit, we had already sent it. And I remember the person that I was coordinating it with, he looked into it, he just kept posting, Elson, why did this email go? Why did this email go? And I couldn't save my face. I was so embarrassed. So I can really relate to this wonderful individual, and I can see that in this thread, all those other people that commented on it, they could relate to it as well. This email was not sent to 5,000 people. It was sent to 40 million subscribers of HBO Max. In fact, if you're a subscriber of HBO Max, very likely that you got this email, which is said the integration test email. A lot of people, a lot of famous personalities have come on. They have shared their stories, like some of the developers at Shopify. In fact, Monica Lewinsky, who is, famous or infamous for the Bill Clinton scandal, she came up during her internship story. She shared some examples of that. It's a wonderful thread. And the beauty of it is that we often talk about the success stories, right? We talk about the success stories of entrepreneurs, of people who their risk appetite, how they take big risks, how they worked hard to climb the ranks and achieve where they are. But it's not very often that we talk about our mistakes, right? So what I want you guys to do is, if you're an intern, if you're a student, or if you're an entrepreneur, if you're working somewhere, I'm pretty sure you've also had some experiences. And if you'd like to share, would love to hear your opinions. I did my bit. I, put myself on the spot. I made myself vulnerable when I told my story. Would love to hear yours too. Okay, next news. Awesome. So talking about entrepreneurs, that man there is John McAfee. And that is one of his final moments, right? So John McAfee was found dead in his prison cell in Spain. So he was arrested in around October 2020 in Barcelona. The reason is because he faced some charges regarding tax evasion. So between the year 2014 and 2018, it is said that he's made a lot of millions, but he did file taxes. Now, John McAfee is a wonderful personality. Okay, I use the word wonderful because he's kind of a larger than life sort of a person. He's been outright about a lot of his opinions, how he thinks about things. So McAfee, I don't know if you guys know that, or you probably do, right? McAfee is very famous, not just because of the name, but also because of the antivirus that they launched. So John McAfee, his story goes on so he's worked in companies like NASA, he's worked in Lockheed Martin, he's worked in Xerox. In fact, how he was able to develop the antivirus too was during his experience at Lockheed Martin, where he realized the importance of it. And then he went on to build the world's first commercial antivirus solution, which was the McAfee antivirus. But yeah, like I mentioned, he's a larger than life personality, and he's had some bold statements, some controversial statements, and he's in fact gone on to say that in spite of building this antivirus solution, I don't use an antivirus myself. And over the recent years, so in 1994, he resigned from the company, and in 2010, McAfee went on to exit. They were acquired by Intel for around 7.7 billion. So yeah, that was his story. And over the recent years, he's been a very prominent person in the blockchain space, in the cryptocurrency space. And unfortunately, in October 2020, he got arrested. He got arrested in Barcelona, and he was facing extradition back to the US. So John has actually, a couple of years before, he put out this tweet saying that if you ever hear a news, right, that I've suicided, don't take it for word, right? So he's had this, a couple of issues with the US government, etc. In fact, one of the things, he's applied to become the president of the US twice, and he failed both the times. So he's had that say, he's had a lot of forays into that field. He in fact has this tattoo, I think it's on his left shoulder or something, which says whacked, and that's where he says that if you ever hear the news that I committed suicide, don't believe it. And here's the proof. Look at my shoulder. So it's kind of mysterious to some extent, because we don't know, because most of the evidence that points says that this was a scene where he'd taken his own life. We are yet to figure. One interesting thing that happened, or something curious that happened, is on the next slide. So McAfee he had an official Instagram account called the official John McAfee. And very soon, within 30 minutes of his death, this post was put out, right? And it shows the letter Q. Now, people say that this Q is referring to a conspiracy theory. It's called the QAnon conspiracy theory. And QAnon is this conspiracy theory which talks about how there are certain groups, right? Certain satanic groups that are against, say, the Donald Trump administration and how things were going about. And so the QAnon conspiracy theory, this came into light a couple of years ago, very recently too. And we still don't know what this Q exactly refers to, but that is what a lot of people are saying. We'll probably get to find out, or who knows, we probably never will, because the Anon in QAnon stands for anonymous. Okay, fine. Now let's go on to the final news. Now this final news is again the story of another entrepreneur or another wonderful business, right? So in Hong Kong, there's this very prominent newspaper. It's probably the second largest newspaper, or it was the second largest newspaper. It's called the Apple Daily. And this is a glimpse from one of their ads, a trailer of how they run their news. That's the same thing that's shown in the thumbnail in today's YouTube video, where you can see that this person keeps getting attacked by a lot of arrows, and at the end of it, he bites an apple. Okay, and the Apple Daily's logo is also that of a bitten apple. Now, the story goes that Apple Daily is very prominent. It's very famous in Hong Kong, especially because yes, it has a lot in terms of entertainment news, But in addition to that, one of the things that they focus on is pro-democracy, right? And this is probably something that China is not very happy about. And Apple Daily has gone outright telling or complaining about the issue and being a voice for those people who are pro-democratic. In fact, the CEO and founder is a man named Jimmy Lai, and he has gone on to work or speak with US officials in Washington, etc., talking about how we can introduce features of democracy and how that's important in the communist China. Right? Now, the story is a little sad because Jimmy Lai, he started off, it's a typical rags to riches story where he started off as probably an immigrant, he from the Kansas state, then he went on to become a laborer, finally he started saving up money, and that's eventually how he started his first business, which was a business called Jordana Blues. And that was an apparel factory, right? He bought this factory, he built this factory, he built this huge conglomeration, and he used that money to voice one of his opinions, which was the pro-democratic front, and that is with this newspaper. This newspaper lasted for around 26 years, and in fact, on June 20th, it was their 26th anniversary, just 4 days before, and that's around the same time that their offices were raided. A lot of hard drives were collected, and now around 6 people from their team have been arrested, which is one is himself, the CEO, second is their editor-in-chief, a man named Ryan Law, and 4 other people, a couple of business executives, some reporters, etc. Now those 4 people, they have been let go of, but these 2 people have been charged with probably some of the hardest crimes in Hong Kong, and it's kind of sad because they try to put out, the question comes on to about freedom of speech and expression. So this ad, what he says, going back to the Apple story, he says the bitten apple, right? Why is it a bitten apple? So he says this is a reference to the Adam and Eve story. And if it wasn't for, them eating that apple, and if it wasn't for evil, right? If it wasn't for that, there would never be any news. So that is the story of this, and it shows how, in spite of having these arrows, being attacked by a lot of people, just having that apple a day, nobody can prevent the truth from reaching you. Alright guys, so I hope you enjoyed today's news, and I hope you guys got some aspects of truth and news and facts from the world around us. If you did, I would love to get your feedback. Put down a like, subscribe to our channel, and I'll see you again next week. Bye bye.